get it started. Okay, aloha mai kako. It's February 13th, 2024. Super excited to hear about fire ants today in this Koʻa call. Again, these Koʻa calls, as Koʻa, we put them on to bring concerns, issues that might affect our home practice of Malama Aina throughout the Pai Aina. Bring awareness to them. And recently, little fire ants has been a big concern. So Joe and Kimiona are here to share about what they're working on, witnessing, and what's been effective at mitigating their presence here.
In progress.
So with that, and I'm gonna mute you. With that, we're just gonna turn it over to Joe and Kimiona. They'll talk for a bunch of time, and then we can have time for questions. But yeah, all you, Joe. Mahalo, mahalo, mahalo.
Shoots. Aloha, everyone. Mahalo for taking the time and space to focus on little fire ants. I think that this is a really wild issue that we're facing right now. But luckily, I feel like there's also a lot that we can do about it. I thought I would maybe start with, so I work at Key Project. We're a community center out in Kahaluu on the island of Oʻahu. And my job here is a community development coordinator supporting Aina and youth work. Before I worked here, I had heard about little fire ants because I helped with school garden trainings for teachers with the Kokua Hawaii Foundation. So we were always doing our best to, know about the issues that are coming up and doing what we can do in order to make sure that we're helping. So sharing with all of our teachers about little fire ants was really important. I thought everybody had heard about it. And then as things got a little bit worse here on Oʻahu with more and more identified infestations, over COVID in particular, we decided that we were going to host the Oʻahu Invasive Species Council, or OISC, here for a community meeting. And so at that meeting, they announced that they had just found a little fire ant population up the road from Key Project. And I said, I don't have time for that. It's too crazy. So the reason I took it really seriously is because if you have, I feel like a lot of people have ohana or friends from Big Island that hate the little fire ants. Everyone from Hilo will tell you that they're not that bad, but that's because they got to live with them. But if you ask anyone if you could choose to have them or not have them, nobody wants them. And we're here on Oʻahu still in the position where we can put in the effort, make the choice, take the time, and get rid of little fire ants. So make sure that you always, everyone here on Oʻahu, we got to make sure that we stay pa'a on that. Some people are going to act like we don't have a chance anymore, but that's people who don't understand how much we can organize our community around this. Just to reiterate, I feel like most people at this point have heard all of the reasons why everyone wants to get rid of the little fire ants. They sting. Some people have welts that last for like 2 to 3 weeks. Some people, if you're allergic to bees and wasps, they can give you anaphylactic reactions as well. They make pets go blind. There's one farm on Big Island that's a big mai'a farm that, it's got to be a really big mai'a farm because they have 90 grand to spend on pesticides every year to get rid of little fire ants. But, for a business to commit that much money, it's a really serious issue. They also, at the same time, are having a lot of issues staffing and like paying people to harvest just because it's so uncomfortable. We have enough barriers to like the food sovereignty movement, to the like cultural restoration, Aina-based practices. We have enough barriers already, so we don't need another one. The community can come together for this and resolve little fire ants. It just takes a little bit of organizing. One other thing that I wanted to throw in there is that of all the invasive species threats that we have facing Hawaii right now, I think little fire ants are among the more manageable ones for a couple of different reasons. One of them is you don't have to, because they're painful and they'll be in people's houses. You don't really, it's not hard to convince people that we need to get rid of this in the same way that like Myconia might be in the forest forever, but no one will see it and they don't understand the connection between damage to our native forests and the health of like our aquifers and their day-to-day life. The little fire ants, you're like, bah, it makes your pets go blind. And they're like, oh shoot, that's scary. Let's get rid of it. Two, the treatment is really effective. And then three, it doesn't like fly away from us. So because the treatment is effective, it doesn't fly away, and it's really easy to get non-Aina people to understand how damaging they are. Like, we can do this. Yeah. So to go back to how we became involved in this, they found little fire ants right up the valley from Keep Project, and I said, I don't have time for this. My kids, when I go out and do Aina programming, sometimes they can barely handle mosquitoes. So I don't know how they're going to handle like 60 fire ants flying on their face when they're walking through the bushes to go do native outplantings. So as a barrier to the Aina-based programming that I firmly believe is essential to Hawaii, like I'm going to go knock people's doors and double check for fire ants. What we ended up discovering was a 22-acre little fire ant infestation. So in the course of about a week, we went from no fire ants in the valley of Waihe'e to 22 acres of little fire ant infestation. And that process involved me going around with a little thing of peanut butter, a bunch of hashi that I got at 7-Eleven. You can buy the whole kit, peanut butter, hashi, Ziploc bags, and a Sharpie for like $10 at 7-Eleven. And that's really what it takes to start doing some of this community outreach. Yeah, it's very accomplishable. I think that helping our neighbors in that is going to be really important. Sorry, I'm kind of going all over the place on this. We ended up finding 22 acres. I was super grateful because Kapua Cavello, who has been managing the little fire ant infestation out in Kahaluu, really encouraged me to take action. Like we can wait for the organizations that are tasked with handling this to get more staff and more funding, but I don't think, I mean, I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for them to do that. And if once they do get more staff and more funding, I think that we have the capacity to make sure that they're in a much better situation than they are right now. Like we as community members can go forward on that a little bit. I do also want to apologize to everyone from Big Island. Just to say that I wish that we had all been more organized when little fire ants were first coming to Hawaii Island. So that we could have gotten rid of it. So that's another thing that I wanted to say. But I do hope that the stories that come from people on Mokuokeawe can encourage everyone to take this seriously in the same way that the stories coming from Oʻahu, I hope, can encourage folks on other islands to manage coconut rhinoceros beetle. So that is, I think, a little bit of kokua mai kokuaku. I do want to also say that there's a lot of different ways you can participate in this. So one of them that I think is really relevant to Aina organizations is to find out where the closest infestations are. Like there are plenty, any org that's on the windward side probably has less than a 5-minute drive to the closest little fire ant infestation. Really look at that and then think about how your community outreach strategies and like your pilina with your neighbors can be like built and developed around this really tangible and time-bound task. Manage the little fire ant infestation, have a really great relationship with your neighbors into the future. I think that for orgs that are trying to, that like have a big volunteer network, have regular work days, that like the time commitment for managing and eradicating one infestation is one Saturday work day every 6 weeks for a year. and that's what it takes to get rid of the little fire ants. For folks that like don't have that INA access, or people that are less mobile or don't want to carry around equipment and stuff like that, there are also a really encouraging sign is that this year there are a lot of different legislative actions that people have been sharing out in order to better fund the little fire ant response and place restrictions on little fire ant movements, just to give guidelines to businesses and organizations that are like moving things around. There's also stuff here on Oʻahu from the city council. So anybody that you talk to who's in charge of anything, I would highly recommend asking them what the heck they're doing about invasive species, because it really touches, I think, a lot of different kuleana that's out there. So I'm pretty confident that most people in government should have an answer for that. And if they don't have an answer for that, then that's another conversation. So I don't know. I like I said before, I've been yelling about little fire ants quite a lot with a lot of different people. It's really fun. I recommend it. Everyone should try. But I do think that there's a lot of important conversation to be had about who we think, like the community po'o, that can take on some of that like door knocking, or who would be ready to go and find these ants, and then who might be able to assist with actual treatments. I think that there's some interesting conversations to have around that. I also think that there's a lot of details and logistics about what an organization that does a lot of outplantings can do in terms of setting up a quarantine zone for any incoming plant materials, testing things, and then having the confidence to say, like, okay, so like these are all big red or big black ants and they run around really fast. That's not little fire ants. Or these are really sketchy ants. I know it sucks, but I'm going to have to cancel my workday tomorrow because I need these to be tested before I can confidently put them in the ground. I think those are important conversations to have, but I do want to stop talking so much and then see what folks have questions on after Kimiona shares a little bit more.
Yeah, mahalo, Joe. I think you segue right into kind of where I have stepped into this realm. So I was introduced to little fire ants through some folks that were already doing work in the work, and they were recognizing that they weren't really progressing. And in our community in Waimanalo, there were a few bad players, as we call them, bad actors. What we learned was there was a challenge in approaching the agriculture community and the agriculture industry to address this particular problem. So Waimanalo had a breakout of LFA about 10 years ago. And as I learned in this process, the ag industry kind of hush-hushed it. Even when the elected officials kind of got involved, everything just got swept under the rug. There was some improvements, but it kind of went dormant. And so one of the first things that fell on my lap was the need for us to, one, verify what took place. So I went to this nursery and observed and purchased plants and observed what was taking place in the plants. And that's how some of that got called forth. And then I went back to the nursery to report that. And then that started a really big trickle of effect with regards to what the processes are for a normal community member in how we would get the support. Being involved in some of the work with regards to legislature and being on the neighborhood board gave me a really good platform to start calling this out in public. So calling the Department of Ag out, calling the LNR out, calling the different agencies, Hawaii Ant Lab, OISC, to the table and asking that demanding really that they prove to our community that we're not at threat, caused some ripple effects within that space, and then it caused some ripple effects within the ag departments. And so we had some outreach done at some of these sites in Waimanalo, followed by some really quick community response from the agriculture community when we threatened to take their names publicly. And we did so more to push the needle because we felt like if these people who knew they had fire ants, I mean, these people knew they had fire ants, were choosing to be negligent in their kuleana to malama the safety of our community, I felt that they needed to be called out on that publicly. So when I brought that to the Ag Association, they were very hesitant, obviously recommending not to do that. I said, well, then you get your people in order or we will get them in order for you. Yeah. And just that statement pushed a lot of people into emergency mode. You know, everyone started to think about their back channels, all the different relationships that they could pull forward to get some of the resources that they needed. What we know is that LFA and any of our invasive species pose a serious threat to the livelihood of our communities and our economics, but also our culture and our lifestyle. And so there is always an invasive species around. We have a list of toxic and noxic things that noxious things, I should say, that are present always. And it's fallen on just the hands and the ears of those that are directly involved with having to care for them. And so we needed to elevate the concern higher. And what this did is it pushed legislators who got called out on this, legislators, I should say, who got called out personally and asked personally, what you doing about this? That started a fury of just getting more and more people involved, having really hard conversations about what the needs were, bringing in the Hawaii Ant Lab and realizing that for this whole island, we have one person, right? Hawaii Ant Lab staffing is really understaffed. So there's no way they had the capacity to do the work that needed to be done to preserve the integrity and the safety of our communities. The Department of Ag highlights different challenges that they had in relationship to their ability to get in. One of the biggest challenges we found with the Department of Ag was they have no capability, no authoritarian capability to go in and shut down a nursery or shut down a farm, even though they're the Department of Ag. And so we needed to change that. We needed to make sure that the Department of Agriculture, who holds the understandings for these leases, has the ability to go in and really work with these people. And if they're not wanting to be a part of the solution, to challenge that. They should not have the ability to decide for us as a community what the outcomes are going to be. And that's where it got uncomfortable. People didn't want to argue and fight with the Department of Ag, and they didn't want to jeopardize potentially Hawaii's ag. And we felt a little bit different about it. We felt that if we continue to go down this path, Hawaii's ag would start to suffer because, as Joe mentioned, the Mai'a farmers cannot staff anymore, right? We have orchards of things that are taking place. Now, one of the biggest things to learn from this particular incident and circumstance is that there are two different types of ants that people commonly engage with that sting, right? We have our tropical fire ants, which is the ones you go down to the beach park and you see around the trash cans and all of that. That's tropical fire ants, typically nest builders in the sand and the dirt. That's our primary one. They're here, they're not going anywhere. Everybody hates them, but that's not little fire ant. Little fire ant is a whole different species that engages in tree life. Like they like to be up in the air. And so if you can imagine having these things up in our orchards and our forested areas, our direct connectivity to these things, whether it be food, culture, medicines, all of that is at risk. And so that's where, for me at least, we decided that it was more important for us to preserve those aspects and worry less about the economy. Because if we didn't, we would lose so much more. And, you know, not being a farmer myself, it was easy for me to make that decision while recognizing that our farmer friends and our farmer ohanas, they need to be supported through this whole thing as well. And so we took that fight to the legislature. And what we're seeing now is a huge increase in community outreach in areas that were identified and are needing identification, a huge ask of humility from the different agencies that say, the community can do this better if we just kokua, tell us how to kokua. And that's where I think people like Kapua, Kavelo, Joe really started to push in and understand that they could fit one of the needs in their community because they knew their community best. They knew their farmers, they knew their schools, they knew their community members, so they could create outreach in a much different way and be much more impactful. The challenge is this is extra time and extra resource taken away from these members of the community and away from their families. And so therefore we needed to find balance. And that's why going back and forth with the departments were really important. Now we're at a point of recognizing like there's a cost to this. And so we need to find out what those costs are. And that's where the legislative budget takes place, right? So organizations like Koʻa that have, you know, a legislative stance can help push the needle, can also help to challenge the current flow of things and the relationships that need to be called out because there's some sketchy stuff that takes place behind the scenes, right? Having the courage to be at that table and calling out the moments that are not the best, I think is important for us as we think about how the communities move forward. Now, that is tremendously important as Joe highlights. Many of us on the call have Aina spaces. And so there's little things that we can already adjust. We can improve and put in testing. We can put in understandings. We can call forward outreach, etc. We can help to organize. Those things are really what's going to change the tide on this. And, you know, I feel for our Hawaii Island people because they've been doing this for decades and have fallen on deaf ears. And so here we are today in 2024, not wanting to accept that our fate is going to be sealed in having to live with LFA. Like Joe said, I don't want to do this. I'm not going to do this. And if someone in the community is choosing not to participate in it, I'm going to call them out. And so just that idea of being accountable to Kaiāulu is a big part of how we're going to progress the conversations, progress the resources, and then really bring people into the learning and working against the current challenges. And so yeah, I'll stop there. And mahalo, Joel, obviously for your continual efforts and leadership. But if there's nothing else, Joe, that you want to add, Nigel, we're open to questions, comments, any kind of other discussion that you guys want to have.
Solid. Mahalo, Joe and Kimiona. I see, maybe Joe, you can start with this Google form that you linked in. And if you want to talk about that real fast, what is that?
Yeah, just to kind of toss in the conversation, we are in a much better position than Big Island was 20 years ago. We have a lot of new technology. We've got a different way of applying growth regulators that stop the colonies from growing. There's a lot of different things that we have. And so on February 29th at Key Project, we are having a panel discussion. Kapua is going to be facilitating, someone from the Department of Ag, someone from the Hawaii Ant Lab, and the Maui Invasive Species Council, who has done a really great job of managing the infestations there on Maui. Dinner's provided because we make people pay for dinner, so that's a good time. We'd love to see anybody who is interested in learning more about little fire ants show up there. So that's a space to continue this conversation as well. But we can also talk about stuff right now, so we can do that too.
Sweet.
Can I actually add one more thing?
Please.
Okay, so get plenty of people out here who are hypothetically being paid to manage this. First off, I wanted to shout out OISC and HAL. So that's the Oʻahu Invasive Species Committee. They're doing a lot to try and step up, but they're being slowed down by the pace of government and the University of Hawaii. The Ant Lab, they're also doing what they can do with the staffing that they have. And so I wanted to shout those folks out. What I have heard from them, the biggest barrier to them going out and treating communities is that they need access to people's properties in order to go out and do the survey. So they have they develop Google Forms for individual infestations, and they need people to fill those out because as state workers, they cannot show up and like, if there's 10 houses in a row and they know that they're there, they can't just go and survey the area. They need people to sign this stuff. And so that's one of those places that community organizations can really fill the gap. I was able to get permissions to go to a lot of places because I'm like, I work the community center down the road, Key Project, Key Project. oh, you come to Kupuna breakfast, oh, you've got a kid, put them in the program, like, oh, I know you guys. That's really, really helpful, and that's something that they're never going to have the capacity or honestly like the roots to do. So that's where we can help out with this, and Aina-minded folks can help step up, make those connections, talk to their neighbors. And a really cool thing about this is a conservation effort is there's plenty of things where you got to be like a buff 28-year-old with a chainsaw in the mountains in order to go and fight certain things. But like, bro, your auntie can do this. She can call everybody on the street. And I think that that's a really empowering and inclusive thing. Like anyone can help out with this. You can be 14 and calling out your neighbors and telling them, Bob, we got to get rid of these ants because I want to pick lay when I'm older. Anyway, that's the thing. I just wanted to share that in particular is one of those areas that we have a lot of capacity to fill so that the people with the equipment to kill ants can go out and spend their time killing ants.
Thanks, Joe. I think my question is, because Koʻa, we support a lot of Malama Aina folks, and actually our purpose is to make people connect and exchange. And so any suggestions on like work days in like protocols? We gotta bleach or burn everything that we have on, or how do we stay extra vigilant?
So my understanding about moving the infestations is that it's not just like one ant, you need like a queen and 10 other ants in order to start a new infestation. So you probably don't have to worry about ants getting into your car if you park in an infested area for like 2 hours. But if you were going to park your car there for 3 months and then drive your car away, that you would want to double check and try and figure that out. Currently, I don't think that there's anything that they have approved for like applying to vehicles, but we can double check with the Department of Ag about that. The biggest thing for folks that are like buying native plants and planting them out or like doing agriculture kind stuff is to be really mindful about what you're bringing on to your property. And then I think you can, one, ask any of your sourcers, like, what are you doing about little fire ants? What are your protocols? And then when you bring stuff on, it's about having a quarantine zone where you put it down, you wait 2 hours, you put out the little peanut butter sticks, and then if there's sketchy ants, you get them tested. And if you have different ants, honestly, you can still send them in to get tested. The OS people, they will send you the species identification of the ant and then recommendations for what pesticide to use if you want to get rid of them. Because there's different kinds of ants. Some of them like sweet stuff and some of them like fatty stuff. So not every ant bait will work for every ant. So.
Yeah, Nigel, I'll add it. If Aina places don't already have a disinfecting area or a detox space for just even their work days, that's a really good behavior, I think, that can be recommended as a protocol, right? To have a space that people can wash gear, sanitize stuff, all of that kind of thing, and just keep that mentality present, because that's one of the biggest measures that we can take physically in order to combat the spread and movement. Like Joe said, these guys are as far as LFA go, the way that they move is not something that gets really nervous about in just a day, right? They don't pick up their whole colony and move in a day. So it's trying to find out and make sure that if there is enough of them with a queen ant, that there isn't movement. And that's how this kind of moves. It moves as a whole colony in the root systems of things and stuff like that. So that's important. What's other important things is people that are next to water sources. There's been some tremendous, looks at how and potentially, how these ants might be able to move should they get flooded out of a space. There's these horror stories kind of rafting together and traveling downstream someplace. And so, we cannot take for granted that reality that if I'm sorry. Oh, if there is if there is that kind of challenge in our spaces, that we be conscious of that too. So if that's not something that's already in place, then that would be one that we'd want to make sure people have a basic understanding of. That would be important.
Solid. Mahalo. Nalani, can unmute.
Hey guys, how's it going? So I'm wondering if the upcoming meeting at Key Project, or if there's another way that we could create like a training for like the people on this call or other interested community members to come out, not just how to test, but how to organize your community and learn from what you guys have done. So that, you know, we can kind of reach out as HOK to get our staff and our interns on board, but also to like rally people in my neighborhood. Because I know in Olamana, we have a small infestation right now, and there's quite a few people in the community that are interested to learn more and do more, and people that have told me they're willing to go door to door. But I'd love to kind of learn from you guys in a training of like, okay, this is how we've rallied the community, and this is just our wins and what we found worked best, and of course to get training on how to do the testing in that kind of a community outreach sense rather than just home testing. I'd love to have something like that put together as a jumping off point, if that's a possibility.
Yeah, I appreciate Nalani, your willingness to jump in on that. That's exactly how it starts. Is someone has the willingness, may not have the quite understandings yet, and then we bring the understanding into that learning. And so, yeah, I'll talk to Joe off of the call, and maybe that's something we'll plan. Our outreach in the past has always been very legislatively aided because we've put a lot of effort and energy onto making sure that the elected officials are participating and also providing the resources. But I think for what you're asking, Nalani, I think Joe and I have the ability to just kind of sit down and do some of that. We might bring in OS because they're a very important partner in that idea and understanding. And then we can pull Hal in as well, just to be present for question and answers. But what you're seeing Joe, myself, Kapua doing is taking the ownership, because these people, these entities have struggled for years and we're just dissatisfied, right? I mean, that's just the truth. It's not their fault, but it's the truth. And we, having community connectivity much better in our own communities, have a greater reach and ability to reach a greater people. And so, Joe, we can coordinate that offline. I think that'd be great. And if there's any interested organizations that want to do that, I think it'd be good to bring in Hal and OS just to be present there, but not put the wholeness on them, because Joe's literally been the one doing it in their community. In Waimanalo, we had a handful of businesses, so we didn't have to go door to door. Yeah, what we needed to do was simply go to these entities and say, I know what you know, and I'm willing to take it onto Facebook. So up to you, your play. Yeah. So very different community and experiences, but certainly ones that we all have to live with in the Koʻolapoko, Koʻolaloa region. So happy to do that. Nalani, thanks for the recommendation.
I'm really excited to do that, and I think that pulling this stuff together is like absolutely 100%. In particular, I do think it would be good for us, and maybe this is something we can follow up with Koʻa folks about, but we can try and get the map from OIST and from HAL about like where the current infestations are, because they had previously identified a couple of different communities that were not responding to their like mailers or door-to-door stuff. And it was, I mean, they said Papakolea and Kahuku in particular. And I was like, I think we can find people for that. Like I'm glad that they asked for help, and we will, like, we're working on that. On this next Tuesday, I'm gonna go up to Kahuku to go talk at the Kahuku Community Association and try and figure that stuff out. But I do think, just in terms of like what we can do, that finding these like community po'o organizations is going to be a really, really, really essential task for making sure that we go in the right direction for this, because as easy as the treatments can be and like the actual sampling and things like that, there is, if we want it to really put them, the people who do the treatment, further ahead, we're going to need to learn how to do things like get GPS points for the samples that we're taking. We're going to need to be really thorough about a couple of different things. And so, you know, there's going to be a little bit that we need to learn from that as well. But finding the community pool that are going to work with community members so that they don't just get 12 cans of Raid and spray that all over their yard and think that they're done. Like, that's not the process for this, or that's not the process that has worked. And I'm pretty doubtful that that will work as well. I also think that this might be kind of a side thing, but like, I don't love pesticides. Like I just want to throw that out there. I don't love pesticides, but I do think that the amount of pesticide that we're putting down is pretty low. And if we can do that once every 6 weeks for 1 year and then be done, that's a lot less pesticide that goes out compared to what would happen if little fire ants were everywhere, because they'll get into your clothes, they'll get into your kitchen, they'll get into your bathroom, they'll be all over the place. And so, like, even people that are pesticide hesitant will end up using pesticides at almost every property where little fire ants can thrive in the yard. So long term, much better to go out and do the actual treatment. But I think we need to find the organizations that have the pilina with the community to do that outreach, do that connecting, and then like answer some of those questions, even if it's like a tough, neither of these choices are good, but one of them is bad for forever and one of them is bad for 8 Saturdays in a year. So
can you maybe say a little more about cost? Like, if I find them in my yard, like, how much should I have, like, expect
so this
to
is
put
the
down?
thing. You should, if you find them in your yard, you should pay nothing, because this whole thing is trash and the government is paying money to handle this stuff. So we need to make sure that that money is going for the actual applications, right? Like that is the boundary that I don't want us to cross here on Oʻahu. I do not want them to say, oh, every individual is going to be responsible for buying their own pesticides and then going out and doing their things, because that is where Big Island is at, right? That's not what we want for Oʻahu. And in order for us to keep, like, it's a really big line for us to cross to say, you know what, you guys, we don't need you. We're going to handle this on our own. We are going to handle things on our own, but I do want to make sure that they're still paying for the pesticides, because this is very time bound. If we organize well, do our treatments for a year and a half, hypothetically, this can drop back down to manageable levels in 2 years, right? OISC does have additional staff that they're like, the money is floating around inside of RCUH. Hopefully they'll be able to get 5 new people by the end of the year. And so, like, I think the goal is to make sure that they are primed and ready to go out and do the treatments, as opposed to forever doing our own treatments. The pesticides, one of them's not expensive, one of them is expensive, but neither should be something that people are paying for out of pocket.
And Nigel, if you really want costs, I mean, you can look at one of the treatments, which is a topical treatment that's typically used for ground stuff. That runs like maybe $20 a smaller container. And then you can easily get into hundreds, if not thousands, based on how much need do you have. But that's why, to Joe's point, we're not trying to put that cost on communities, on farmers, on organizations. That should be a government expense that right now, we're not quite there yet with regards to holding them to that level. And we're working on it. The HDOA ask, I think this year, Joe, was what, 5 million? It was in the millions. And that's something that we express very strongly that it needs to be fed and met so that we can meet the needs of how much material, how much resource material to combat it needs to be in the pockets of the community members, but it should be the pocket of the community. So like people like Ant Lab, they're looking at other resources and other funding sources to help offset some of that because they're not getting that money from the government side, right? From the Department of Ag side and from legislature. So they're trying to pull money from different orgs or different funding streams to try and make up some of that need. It's not so much the application need more than it is really having the amount of chemical that you need. And that's where the community was really, in Joe's case and Kapua's case, they just said, tough, I'm going to do it anyway. You know, so yeah, we need the hands and the bodies to do that, but that material cost shouldn't come from people.
Solid. Yeah, as far as like how to detect them, are there like coconut rhinoceros, the trees start getting work? Are there cues or kilo that you guys have to say, hey, I think there's LFAs in this area? Like, what should we look out for as we drive around?
One of the things that I thought was wild when I was going around my neighborhood, like sticking peanut butter sticks all over the place, was that people, like, a 22-acre infestation is not a new infestation. I was really hoping when I went up there and heard that there was one little fire ant sample that came in, that they were going to show me like one recently planted banana stump that they had just bought from Waimanalo. That was not the case. People had actually reported getting bitten for over 3 years, right? And so it's the thing is, the ants are super tiny, so you probably won't see them if you're just walking around looking for ants. These are not going to be big ants. They're not black ants. Some people thought that they were allergic to something. Some people thought they were getting bitten by spiders. Like if you're getting bitten by anything, just like go stick a peanut butter stick out there. I think that that's the thing. And then also watch out for your kupuna. Like they're not necessarily going to do that. So if you've got aunties or uncles or whatever, anybody that's out there that doesn't do too much yard work, like go and check with them. If people have, yeah, I think that's it. That I'm gonna say is like if you're getting bit or feeling weird stuff and you don't know what it is, just
yeah, I'll add to that, Joe. So Nigel, you know, these guys, they're not the most evident. You cannot just open your eyes and start seeing them. They take a real like personal relationship with those plants, understand what's happening. Ants in, right? Joe can speak to that a little bit more, but they farm aphids typically. Aphids suck the juice out of your plants and create this wonderful food source that these ants kind of milk out of these aphids. And so in general, when you start to see plants kind of looking a little struggling, sometimes they might have some visible, you know, like the signs of health in the plant itself might be kind of questionable. You wouldn't immediately assume it's ants, but if it's other insects that the ants are farming, then it's something to be cautious of. As Joe said too, like people that are getting bit by these things have no clue that they're even getting bit by ants because they're so tiny. By the time they fling their clothes off, there's nothing there, and they just have welts all over their system. And so, you know, when you're looking in your aina, the best way to start is really to start with the peanut butter sticks and then move those peanut butter sticks in and around your aina space. And then just see what type of ant you are calling to the stick, to that peanut butter bait, and then kind of move in that direction. They're created so beautifully, I think, in the way that they naturally exist. It's just unfortunate that these particular ants are pests in this way, but they are farmers of things. So that's something that we got to be real maka'ala about as well.
And one thing I wanted to reiterate as well is like, I know we're saying some people never noticed these guys for a long time. They had been getting bit for 3 years. I don't want people to think that that means that this is not a serious issue. Like neighbors of those folks had little fire ants in their kitchens, so they were spraying Raid on the countertops, and I'm like, that's not good for your guys' health. Like, let me treat this. You can do that from the outside. There was also this one guy where we went into the garage and we picked up a cooler, and underneath the cooler, I thought it was sawdust at first, and it was a pile of little fire ants. So like they like to congregate in kind of wet places. They're so slow that, or they're so tiny and they're so slow that like when you first see them, you might not even think that they're moving. They're very slow. So if you see anything that's running around like crazy, probably not little fire ants. Also, like as the infestation grows older and older, it will become denser and denser. So you can have little fire ants in a relatively small population and not notice them, but as time goes on, it will become more and more intense, and then the impact on your plants, on your ohana, on your pets, that deepens the denser the infestation is. So I just wanted to reiterate that it's like, even though you might not notice them when they are first there, that's when it's our best chance to get rid of them. And then one other thing in terms of kilo and like how you might notice, when there's a well-established little fire ant colony, you won't see other ants. So if you used to have the big black ants running around and now you don't, check. That's just a thing to look at.
Oh, getting itchy. This is nuts. Any questions, Malia? Malia, have any manao question?
No, no questions, but mahalo, Joe and Kibiona, for always holding it down and helping to spread the awareness.
Mahalo. Any last manao from anybody? Or Joe and Kimiona, any last manao?
Yeah, if no one else has anything to add, you guys know how to find us. No shame, call us, just ask. That's the biggest thing is everybody, there's when we talk about community, there's this idea of staying in your own.
Uh-oh. That sounded like that was going to be really epic.
It's going on right now. It's getting epicer and building. There's too much mana for the internet.
Yeah.
Everybody got things to do, yes. And it's because of our lack of that we don't get the opportunities that we really should to address these things the way we should. So just one of those key, I think, throwouts is just, it's all of our kuleana to malama this aspect of what we do, right? It's not OISC, it's not the ledge, it's not this. Everybody has to do their part. And so if we took that approach in this, like we do in other things, we could have thousands of people doing stuff around our Kaiulu, and yet we don't. So we have to shrink the gap a little bit more about when someone chooses to be involved in it and when they don't. And just important for us to keep drilling that home, like it's all of our kuleana. Right? We just happen to be people that were like, hell no, you're not going to do this in my community and ignore me. No way. Right? So that's where we are today. And that's just my last ditch. Like, if you think it's not your kuleana, it is. Straight up. Yeah. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Kimiona. Sorry, you might have got cut off in the middle just a little bit, but I think we heard the feeling of it. Mahalo. And Joe, any last manao?
Yeah, I wanted to say that like every piece of this is really important, and not everyone is going to go out there and kill the ants. But like we need people calling ledge people and calling the Department of Ag and being like, guys, what the heck? Like, we can go out there and kill the ants, but if you don't stop nurseries from selling plants with little fire ants, like every time somebody goes and plants one of those plants in their yard, that's another 1 year of treatment that goes out. So like, I don't have time for that. Stop making work for me, Department of Ag. Like, what is this? And the cool thing is most nurseries and farmers that I have talked to are very much in favor of handling the little fire ants decisively. So it's just, I'm not exactly sure who it is that is not on board, but you know, most people are into this, and are looking for a way to, I don't know, we just got to handle this, and we got to help people understand what their role can be in an efficient and effective response. I did have one thing that I was thinking before, Kimiona's emphatic, this is everybody's kuleana. If you think it's not your kuleana, double check, because I'm pretty sure it is. His speech was really good. Let me think. I had something else that I wanted to say, but I forget. Yeah, we gotta figure that out. How to stop new infestations from growing. There was something about antes. Anyway, I don't know. There's a lot of this. The conversation is ongoing. I think test your yard, test your friends' yards, test your auntie's yards. Just go out there. The peanut butter stick is super easy. And yeah, we can, this kuleana is out there for whoever is going to pick it up. Oh, okay. So this is the thing I was going to say. The reason we cannot put our grandchildren's grandchildren on a blanket in the park cannot be because the very nice people that work for the state could not convince your auntie to let them in the yard. Okay, so like that's what it comes down to. We can talk to our aunties, we can talk to our community, we can get access to these spaces that are hard for these other organizations to get to. So like when you think about that, like I just think about this all the time when they're like, oh, people did not respond in Kahuku and Papakolea. I'm like, brah, you just got to get the right, some Papakolea uncle, some Kahuku auntie to be the ones who take this kuleana on, and then it's gonna be solved, right? And it's just about finding the right people to ask that question. It's finding the right people who are going to take on this kuleana, and it is also about making sure that that auntie has all of her questions answered, that the person who's talking to her knows how to talk to aunties, and we can figure this out. So like that's what it comes down to, right? Is like we cannot let Kahuku being far away, or like it's just crazy that such a big barrier is finding the face-to-face time to talk to these folks, when it's like you just need the one person who knows everybody on their street to get it, and then we can work through this. So I'm sorry it took me a while to get there, but that's what it comes down to. And that's how serious the little fire ants are. Yeah, is that like if you want your grandchildren's grandchildren to grow up in a Hawaii that we recognize, where we can pick lei, you can launa in the park, you can grow vegetables in your yard, like this is an important thing that we need to handle in order to make that our future. So there you go. Mahalo, everyone.
There you go. Mahalo, Joe. Mahalo, Kimiona. Super important. Thank you. Thank you. And have a good day, everybody. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.
Mahalo, Dan. Thank you.